Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. So I have a question for you. Did this just start all by itself for you if you were waiting here? That's a new feature of So. I've been requesting that for a while, but looks like that might have actually just happened, which would be kind of cool. Anyhow, thanks everyone for being here, and we have kind of a special program today. Well, they're always special, right? But here we're going to be talking about OpenScore, which is a really, really amazing project that's been going on and in some form for like 10 years now, and somehow I've never actually done a whole session about this. I've talked about it from time to time, but this will be the first time I think that I've done a whole session devoted to OpenScore and what this is. I see Gijs has a question, and actually, Gijs, I answered that question in the newsletter this this time. So I would recommend going and taking a look at the newsletter where I showed exactly how to do that. But I can demonstrate that real quick anyhow. Also, why not? So what you would do is you have the inspector open, and you click a lyric. And then you come over to the inspector, you hit italic, and then set a style. And that will make all of the odd lines. And so I did it for the odd line. You really want to do it for the even lines, but the same thing. And whoever, created this score did that already. So they made one italic and then hit set as style, and that will make all of the even lines all of the even lyrics italics. And so that way you can have alternating Roman, italic, etc. So anyhow, that is how that works. So I am going to, I'm going to be talking about the OpenScore project. Ooh, did I just set that to 400? Did I see 400? That would be bad. No, it's 440. Okay, good. OpenScore. Let me talk about what OpenScore is, and I'm going to show you some examples, and then I'm going to bring up a special guest, Maureen, who is a manager for the OpenScore project, and I will talk a bit about the history of the project, getting where we got, how we got where we are now. And then let Maureen kind of take it from there. But first, let me give you some backstory. So the OpenScore project began as a single piece of music, a large piece of music, Bach's Goldberg Variations, where a man named Robert Douglas decided he wanted there to be a MuseScore edition of the Goldberg Variations. Well, he might not have started off thinking he wanted it in MuseScore. He just knew he wanted it free and open and something that anyone could access, anyone would be able to make use of. And so the Goldberg Variations here was the beginning of the OpenScore project. And what happened here is a group of people, including this person, Robert Douglas, worked to actually enter all the music from the Goldberg Variations into MuseScore. And this was during MuseScore 1 days. We were working on MuseScore 2, and as it became apparent that certain features would be needed to support the Goldberg Variations, well, those features got added. So Werner Schwer, the originator of MuseScore, was totally on board with this, and he added features to MuseScore to support the Goldberg project. And so Robert Douglas and his wife, Kimiko, the name I can't necessarily remember or pronounce correctly, and that's my bad. Let me just OpenScore.cc. OpenScore.cc is the official website of the OpenScore project. So I'm going to actually post this into the chat, just in case anyone wants to check it out. It started as kind of a Kickstarter project, and it's kind of grown from there. And so you get some background about this here. But there was a recording then that Kimiko put together of her performance of the Goldberg Variations. And let me bring this back, MuseScore window back, and bring my little miniature chat window back. Here we go. So there was this open version. And so if you think about it, you can go to IMSLP. You can go, the Internet Music Sheet Library. I never can remember what that stands for. But you can go to IMSLP and get PDFs of all this great music. But you can't play a PDF, right? You can't transpose a PDF. You can't do things with a PDF. So having it in MuseScore allows you to hear the playback and, transpose it, do all these other things, arrange it for other instruments, copy and paste. So this is the beginning of the Goldberg Variations. So the Goldberg Variation project happened, and so Petrucci is what the P stands for. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, one of these days I'll memorize that. I'm happy just to remember the abbreviation, IMSLP. So the Goldberg Variations was being developed while MuseScore 2 was in development. After MuseScore 2 came out, then they decided, well, let's go on and do Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. So they did the entire Well-Tempered Clavier, right? And so all the 12 major and minor keys, so 24 keys total, preludes and fugues in all keys. Here's the C major fugue. Etc. Right? So the really nice thing with these is not only are they entered into MuseScore, but they are, professionally edited. People who know a thing or two about editing music would be on board to like correct mistakes and deal with all the things that we're dealing with basically in the music engraving workshop, and playing the role of both editor and engraver, deciding on things like stem directions, deciding on things like for the fugue here, do both of these voices go on the top staff, or do you start off with the voices in separate staves and then combine them later when there's a middle voice that's like, should the middle voice stay in the top staff or wander to the bottom staff? These are all decisions an editor makes, right? So Peter Jonas was the person who then came on board as the official top organizer of the whole OpenScore project. And that's when it took on the OpenScore name as opposed to just Open Goldberg and then Open Well-Tempered Clavier. It then became this whole project to digitize lots more scores. And lots of people signed up to help transcribe these scores, but then the bottleneck became, well, actually doing a great job of editing them, making sure that they are good, that they are error-free and good to look at. That's quite a project, especially when you consider the scope of some of the works that they looked at. So like one of the pieces that is done as part of OpenScore is 1812 Overture, which is not a small piece. It's not like the largest piece ever written, but it's it's a piece for a number of instruments. It starts off with a smaller ensemble, but by the end of the piece, it's it's the piece you all know. It's this guy. Etc. Right? So it's a piece for a large orchestra, large enough that it doesn't fit on the page here because apparently I think this was done in MuseScore 2. When MuseScore 3 came out, things changed. The score wasn't updated, and that is a problem, an ongoing problem, that when they produce all this effort into getting it to look really great in one version, the next version of MuseScore comes out and maybe it's not so right anymore and is going to need some fixing. So this is a score that apparently needs a bit of fixing for MuseScore 3. So They did, a dozen or so scores as part of this OpenScore project beyond the original Goldberg variations and beyond the uh, Goldberg variations and then well-tempered clavier. Oh yeah, the canons. There's not any canons in here. Sorry. There's canons in the Bach Goldberg variation. That's a little pun joke for you. Um, but actually, I thought that's what you meant at first. I thought you were talking about that kind of canon. So the Goldberg variation definitely has canons. The well-tempered clavier is was preludes and fugues, and then they did a dozen other pieces, some Bach pieces, some Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, an opera, all sorts of pieces got done, and then it became kind of unmanageable to have a lot of people transcribing things and just one person at the top of the chain trying to do all the editing, and then came along something that this is what we're going to bring Maureen on in a little bit to talk about is they decided to reduce the focus by focusing on certain certain types of music, and one of them was what are called lieder or art songs. And so this is for those of you who are doing the music engraving workshop. This is the piece we're working on this week, and ich sagte nicht, and uh, this piece is for voice and piano. And this is a whole set of music, mostly from the 19th century, right? That is like the heyday of the classical art song, 19th century, Romantic era composers, Schubert, etc. And or late classical into romantic, I should say, and post-romantic composers also. So it's largely 19th century repertoire, extending a little before, a little after, and but all for voice and piano. And what happened was there was another project involving like trying to digitize that music to do some analysis based on computer algorithms and stuff. And since all that music had started to have been entered, someone, and I don't know this whole story, someone decided, hey, it would be really cool to kind of finish this project and take those pieces that someone had started to enter and really just pretty them up and make them part of the OpenScore project and, get the piano parts in because I think they only entered the voice parts. And so it became a thing. And that project just took off. They had some funding at first. So they were able to pay some people to do some of the editing and some of the transcribing, and eventually the funding ended, but still, by that point, the project had momentum. And there are, Maureen can probably tell us when she comes on, and that'll be coming very shortly, how many. And Maureen, feel free to check in the chat and let us know any of the answers to this. But it's hundreds at least, right, of scores. MuseScore.com, OpenScore leader. Uh, so if I go to the leader, it'll probably tell us how many of these things there are. But yes, there are many of them. And there was also a focus specifically on female composers, and that's going to be an important part going forward as well. But yeah, I'm not sure the total number. Every once in a while, I'll see a blog article that says, "Wow, we just hit our 400th score or whatever," but I don't remember the number. But it's a lot of scores. 1,400 scores. That's amazing. Now, not all of those are finished. Some of those are ones waiting to be finished. But yeah, there are a lot of scores done here as part of this leader project. And so the leader project, and they did a really nice job of the editing, making it look good and also sound good. They use oboe usually for the voice normally. Yeah, just really beautiful music done beautifully. So the OpenScore leader leader corpus, it was called corpus, meaning like a set of music. The project is essentially done as far as it's not necessarily actively being worked on because now there is a new project where And Maureen is going to be telling us more about this, but before I bring her on, I do want to, while I can still be easily screen sharing and focusing on that, I want to talk about one of the pieces that's being done as part of the new project, which is the string quartets. This is now going to be a focus just on string quartets. If you think about all the issues that come up trying to do something as complicated as the 1812 Overture with all those parts, and then trying to format all those parts and all the complications that come up from dealing with large scores and all the complications that come up in different versions of MuseScore, um, if you focus just on string quartets, you make that problem simpler. And this was Maureen's amazing idea. And so I'm going to play a little bit of this piece, and I'm going to tell you that unless you looked at this piece on MuseScore.com when it got uploaded, you have never in your life heard this piece before. I'm going to play a little bit of it and then bring Maureen on. So I'm going to play this for, a little longer than just a few seconds. All right. So now, with this background in place, I now want to bring up Maureen to be able to uh, tell us more about this whole OpenScore project, in particular about the leader corpus and this string quartet initiative also. So very shortly, Maureen will be joining us, and here we go. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yes, we have you. So, I have, by the way, at the top of my screen, or top right of my screen, a view button that lets me control whether we're in speaker view or gallery view. And I think everyone gets that control for themselves. Ooh. Yeah, I think everyone gets that control for themselves. So, if you like, go ahead and click the button at the top right so you can see us both at the time if it's disorienting to you to see us go back and forth. Anyhow, Maureen, welcome. Hello.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I'm so glad this worked out and that you were available. So when I had seen your name as part of all the open score things, but then when you joined the community and posted that you were now a manager of the project and that you were working on the string quartet thing, this was really really interesting to me. And once I started doing this music engraving workshop, I realized that wow, there's this whole connection. There's this whole need for people to get good at both the technique of engraving and also how to use MuseScore and in order to support projects like this. And then I realized I've never really talked about OpenScore in this cafe, and so all this came together, and I'm so glad you're here to help us um, uh, unwrap what OpenScore is about. So I just talked about a whole lot of things, and there's probably any number of places where you're like, oh, I should add this, I should add this, I should add this bit of information. Why don't you fill in some blanks in anything that I've said that you just wanna add to here?
Well, where do I start?
How did
I
you
can
get
talk.
involved?
How did I get involved? Right. Well, I first got involved with MuseScore as a result of taking up the cello at the age of 60 and wanting to be able to produce music that I could print off myself. So that's how I got into MuseScore. And then
When
I
you say
saw the
produce, you mean you were composing or you wanted to just.
arranging mostly.
Okay, gotcha.
Uh, things that were uh, piano pieces I wanted to play on my cello, so I would just put them in MuseScore and print them off. That's how it started. I never uploaded anything to MuseScore, and I didn't even know that you could download stuff from MuseScore either. But then the OpenScore project started, and I thought, oh, I'd like to get involved with that, because it really is, to me, a bit of a passion that there's all this music which is public domain and it's available, but we can't do anything with it. And for instance, I now have, I'm in a string ensemble, and I would like to arrange music that is on IMSLP for a string ensemble. But you can't do anything with those unless you actually transcribe them yourself onto MuseScore. So when this came up, I thought, yes, I want to be involved in this. And so I expressed an interest. There was a button to press and an email. You just gave your email address. And then nothing happened for some considerable time.
And this is because of the bottleneck I mentioned. There was more people interested in possibly transcribing than there was the ability to deal with.
Yes, that's probably the case. And if there are still all those people wanting to do transcribing, I would love to hear from you, because we could do with some more transcribers. But anyway, yes, when the Lieder Corpus started up, I was invited to join that. And after a lot of hassle, because I couldn't work out from the instructions they gave how to get started, but I contacted Dan Rutan, who was one of the managers of that at the time. And he was very, very patient with me. He got me started. He taught me practically everything I know about MuseScore. And within quite a short space of time, I was considered to be an experienced transcriber. And
just out of curiosity, what's a short period of time mean here? Weeks, months?
Well, by the time the funded project finished, which I think lasted about 3 months, I was considered to be experienced. Okay. And then after the funding ran out, I thought that the whole thing had ended. That was the impression I was given. All the reviewers who were being paid to do the reviews went their separate ways, except for Dan, who I later discovered carried on in a voluntary capacity. And it was about a year later that I discovered it was still going and got involved again. And by then, all these scores that had been produced with the vocal line and the text in had been used up, and we were now adding more and more and producing it. Well, Dan and some of the others were producing the templates, and we were just doing the transcription, and it just sort of mushroomed from there. I think there were about 10 regular transcribers at that point. And that's how I really got heavily involved, but then discovered that there was, as you say, this bottleneck with the reviews. And so I asked whether some of the experienced transcribers could be trained as reviewers, not thinking that I would actually be included in that, but be careful what you ask for. So Dan then very patiently instructed me in the art of reviewing, and I was able to eventually take over some of that role, along with one or two of the other transcribers as well. And it then grew even faster, and until it got to about 1,200 scores, and then we had a meeting. This was during lockdown. We had a meeting, and the question was asked, well, do we carry on doing these scores forever, or do we branch out into something new? And that's when the idea of the quartets was put forward. And after a bit of discussion, that was what we decided to go with.
All right, and I want to interrupt here for a moment just to mention something that I thought was really interesting about the Lieder Corpus. I think one of the reason why that particular set of songs was used yeah, because this was mentioned on one of the websites, is it's wonderful music for analysis because you get a lot of stuff in a small amount of space. It's hard to analyze a symphony. I mean, you have to look at a lot of stuff and deal with transposition and all. And you can analyze solo piano music all day long for sure, but there is something nice about having just melodies separate and then having accompaniment separate. And for analysis, music theory people, theory teachers like myself, love using this music for like examples in our theory classes. And I'm pretty sure that's why it got selected originally and why it's so great to have so much of it. But yeah, at some point having 1,200 art songs and nothing else starts to feel out of balance. So yeah, string quartets, great idea.
It took quite a while for it to get started for various reasons. It's a very different concept. From I think it's actually easier from a transcription point of view. Transcribing piano music presents some considerable challenges when
Yes.
you've got, uh, you have to use several different voices to get all the notes in, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then there's this awful thing called cross-staff notation, which MuseScore certainly at the moment doesn't handle particularly well, and it even works in MuseScore too. And so we lost all of that by going over to string quartets, and we also became uh, it was just one line of music for four instruments. That was so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that for my desire was for this to be usable because I, as a cellist, I involved with various string quartet courses and things like that, and I wanted string quartet music available in a good form. You can print it off from IMSLP. A lot of it does have the parts, but a lot of it is not very clear, and it you can't do anything with it. For instance, if I get a cello part and there's a piece which is way too fast for me to manage, I can put it on MuseScore, rub out half the notes, and just play the important ones. Um, it's called the art of faking it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's things like that. And I also wanted to use some of these to adapt them for my string orchestra. So for me, the leader corpus, as you say, that was great for research, but to be used for performance is probably less what happens. I'm sure it is used for performance, but not to the degree that string quartets probably will be.
Well, one of the
So,
things that, just to interrupt again about the leader corpus, is the ability to transpose is huge
yes,
because a lot of the songs might only be published in one particular key and or maybe a high voice and a low voice key, but you know,
yeah,
that's just approximations. And so the ability to take those pieces and put it in a comfortable key for your voice is pretty huge.
yes,
And for string quartet music, you could reasonably adapt that to be wind quartet or brass
yeah.
quartet or whatever else. And
I use some of the. Uh, I've lost you. You've frozen. Have you still got me?
um, shoot, uh,
Ah, right. I was about to say something and I've forgotten what it was I was saying now.
uh,
Well, apparently I can still be heard. So, right. Can someone remind me what I was saying? Yeah, so what I was saying was that I did take a couple of, there were a few songs which were not just solo and piano, they were SATB. and I in fact used some of those and rearranged them for string quartet or for our string orchestra. So that's another use for them. But as far as the string quartets are concerned, they, in my view, are for people to use. There are ever so many amateur string quartets in existence, plus, of course, the professionals. And to have this music available in a readable, usable form, a good quality score is, to my mind, very useful. And so our job is to make sure these scores are of good quality and are user friendly, so which is a nightmare when it comes to page turns and things like that. But that's our aim, is to have good quality. People know what to expect when they get an OpenScore string quartet score, and that they will actually be used by the players.
Nice. So I know we talked about you going through your process a little bit, what's actually involved in creating these. But also, I figure, I don't know if you wanted to demonstrate using the piece that I just played a bit, or if you just want to talk about that and demonstrate with something else. But whichever of those you feel like running with now, go for it.
Um, do you want me to share my screen or?
Yeah, go ahead. Just remember,
Uh,
don't share the audio or we'll get echoes.
I don't know how. Right.
Okay.
So yeah. Okay. Right. So I'm now screen sharing. So let me see. So you should now be able to see the score that you had up there. But I'm
Yes.
going to go instead to the, where are we? This is the last page of the Beethoven Opus 18 number 1, which is one that I have just finished
Mm.
transcribing. So if I can show you how I go about that.
Yes.
Hold on, that's not the Beethoven. There we go. I have, MuseScore, generally speaking, you would have the whole page open. But
So
when
let
I'm
me think about this for a second. Opus 18 means these are some of the earlier string quartets, right?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So I have my my MuseScore screen on the top half, and I have the IMSLP scan on the bottom half, and that's how I will look at this and transcribe into there. And again, when I'm doing reviewing, the same thing applies. I will have the transcriber's score in front of me. I'll have this here, and I will be checking for any wrong notes, anything that has gone wrong, any missing dynamics, and things like that.
By the way, the just
But
totally random question about that process because I'm always not sure. Do you typically work one measure all four instruments, one measure all four instruments, or one line, one instrument all the way across, one instrument all the way across, or is there a recommendation that you would have there?
Well, I have tried. Everybody has their own way of
Yeah.
working, and everybody has their own way of inputting the notes as well. Mine is probably about the most laborious of them all, but it's the way I can operate. So for me, what I have found when I was doing the leader, I found it was better to do the entire vocal part first, and then do the piano. But with these, I find it's better. I would do one line, and then I will go back with the input. Then I will go through it and put in the articulation, the slurs, the dynamics, the staccatos, and then I will go through it again and check that it's all correct. And then I will go on to the next line.
Hmm.
That's what works for me. But everybody works out their own way of doing it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. Now I said about the problem with doing quartets is the parts, because they are the most used thing. People don't play string quartets from the score, they play from their own part. And so they have to be correct and they have to be good. And the problem is that when you put something in here, it doesn't necessarily transfer to the parts. So if I, for instance, decide I want to flip that slur so that it's underneath, if you now go to the viola part, you will find that that hasn't happened. So let's try it. And also from the other way, if I have a part, and let's try it with that slur, and then you go back to here, it hasn't happened.
Yes. And I will interrupt here also. And yeah, eventually we would love to have ways of connecting these better so that you can choose when it happens. But one of the reasons.
There is a way that
Yeah.
the way that I do it
Yeah.
now is I get the score so that I know it's correct. And then I delete all the parts.
Yes.
And if you recreate the parts
It
afresh
inherits
from
those.
the score, then all the bits that you do go in.
Yes.
But that is the reason why, for the most part, our instructions to transcribers is use only the default. Let MuseScore do what MuseScore does, and don't try to change it.
Yes.
Any sort of manual alteration is likely to result in problems. In the early days, I was trying. I don't know if I've got an example here. These, for instance, I think they're a bit too short, so I was trying. Right, okay, let's increase the length of the stems. And when I went to the parts, I found the most bizarre changes have happened. So we now insist that everything is default unless there is a really, really good reason for doing otherwise. And that will also, yeah. Yes,
I was going to say, I think that's good. You go ahead and finish your sentence, and then I want to address that a little bit.
Yeah. And that, what sentence had I started?
Oh, you're talking about keeping the defaults on things like the beams.
Yeah. You keep the default, and the other thing that is useful from that point of view is when a different version of MuseScore comes out, it's less likely to cause problems. We had a lot of problems with some of the stuff that we had on the leader corpus when MuseScore 3 came out. I had to go through all the scores and upgrade them because things like the cross-staff notation, you ended up with hideous things happening with that, and all kinds of other problems occurred as well. So yes. I'm hoping that when MuseScore 4 comes out, I'll have very little to do with the quartet scores.
And I actually loaded one of them into MuseScore 4, that particular one that I played earlier. I loaded it into MuseScore 4 to see, and yes, it looks just better. It just looks better because you left everything at the defaults, and the defaults are better in MuseScore 4. So things like the beam, the height of stems on beam notes, that sometimes was weird. Some things about slur positioning was sometimes weird. A lot of these things are going to be greatly improved. So if you left them at the defaults in MuseScore 3, the new defaults are going to be that much better. But also, if you had made manual adjustments, it means, oh, now there's a problem, because now what do your manual adjustments apply to? Do they apply to the old defaults or the new defaults? And so very often what it gets decided in MuseScore 4 is, let's just throw out the manual adjustments and hope that you'll like the new defaults enough that you don't need them anymore. So that's basically the approach that is being taken. One thing I would observe about things like the flipping of the slur directions is one reason why they're not connected between score and parts is often the reason for flipping a slur would be, say, oh no, the slur on the viola part is bumping into stuff on the second violin part. Only flip it below so it doesn't bump into that anymore. But on the second on the viola part, there is no second violin part, right? It's just the viola part. So your reason for flipping it may or may not exist. So
Yeah.
ultimately, we would love to just give you the choice to say, hey, this adjustment I want to apply to both scoring parts, whereas this adjustment I want to just be one or the other. For now, though, we have to err on the side of the one or the other.
And the other thing is that with the leader corpus, we were encouraged to try and replicate the IMSLP scan
Ah,
as
yes.
closely as possible. But now, to the extent that if their beam was one way, that was the way we had it, whatever MuseScore
Gotcha.
did, and all kinds of things like that. But now we do stick almost exclusively to the default.
Nice. So, I still, at some point, if now's a good time, I'd love to hear more about the story of that piece that I played earlier. Or,
Oh no, that is a really interesting story. It happened when earlier in the year we were asked to concentrate on women composers, um, and there was some funding available for a reviewer to do this. So we started doing research and tried to find string quartets by women composers, and there's not a vast repertoire available. But when Dan Rutan was researching Emily Meyer, a wonderful composer in my view, found that although Wikipedia says that she composed 7 quartets, string quartets, he in fact discovered that she had composed 8. And what he discovered was that the D major quartet, the 8th quartet, um, the it no longer existed in as a string quartet score. The original string quartet score is missing, but Emily Meyer herself had rearranged the string quartet into a 4-hands piano duet, and I'm going to show you that now. Here we are. So on IMSLP, you have it here. This is or the original here says arranged for violin, alto, and cello, and this is arranged for the piano, 4 hands, by Emily Meyer. So she herself did this arrangement, and when she did it, we looked at it and realised that what she had pretty much done is put each part into one hand, with very little change.
Hmm.
So this score consists of this, if you like, is the left-hand page of a piano duet, and you can see. So that is that would be the cello part, and this is the viola part. But obviously, they don't use the alto clef in piano music, so that alternates between treble clef and bass clef, and sometimes dips down onto the other stave as well, as you can see. So that's the first page, and then the next page is the right hand side of the quartet. So these are in treble clef, and that's the first violin part, and that's the second violin part.
Wow.
So we looked at this and thought, well, could we reconstruct it? There is, in fact, a publication of the piano duet part, but obviously that's in copyright. And one of
Hmm.
the things we are very careful of is to make sure that all the work that we do is with non-copyright material, so that we can release it as OpenScore with no copyright. And this is the right-hand page. So we decided we'd have a go, and I, in fact, personally transcribed this one. You can see it's not always that clear. It's
Yes,
not
it's
like,
better handwriting than
oh yes,
Schumann or Beethoven scores that I've
oh
looked
yes.
at. But
So
yes,
some of the other transcribers have been working on some much more difficult manuscript copies.
Yeah.
But this wasn't too bad, except that the lines don't necessarily match up. The end of
Ooh.
the page obviously does, because when you get to the end of the page, you have to turn the page
Yeah.
for both. But the lines don't. So it was quite difficult at times
Mm.
to ensure that things were correct. And
And there's no measure numbers on this.
no
Yeah.
measure numbers. And also, there are one or two pages, I won't go through to try and find them, where, for instance, you'll have 3 bars here, and it's just got a very faint line over the top with BIS in it. And you just ignore it. And then you get to the end of the page and you find, oh, I'm three bars short. And you keep counting and counting, and it doesn't work. And then you find that if you play those 3 bars twice, which is what this means, you've made
Uh-huh.
up the 3 bars. And
Wow.
this happened 2 or 3 times. But in the end, I managed to get it all done. There were places where we had to. I think there were places where it would have been difficult for a piano duet with them at the level they were at, and so the first violin part was put up an octave. And
Mm.
this is where, after I had done it, I submitted it to Bruno Bauer, who's the musicologist that we employed for the process, and he edited it and dealt with any issues like that he felt needed
Mm.
doing. And the result, if you want to find it, you go to OpenScore string quartets, go to sets, and then scroll down to Emily Meyer, and you will find this is the result. We've got the score and all the individual parts available, and there is the score. And it sounds delightful, as you heard at the
Yes.
beginning. And in fact, if you go to the third movement, the scherzo, that is accessible enough. I printed that off when I went on a string quartet course, and I got some mates when we had a bit of spare time, and I have actually played part of this
Nice.
quartet, which to me is wonderful.
That's fantastic. I'm going to post the link to that exact score here in the chat, um, so that it's that much easier for people to find. And yes, so as far as copyright, Dave's asking about the expiration on that. Typically, the it varies from country to country, and
Yes,
so one of the things that you're probably doing is trying to find like the most restrictive and make because IMSLP hedges on that, right? They will put up scores and say, well, this is public domain in these countries, not
yes.
in these countries. So we'll put it up there and let you worry about whether it's
Yeah, well,
legal for you or not.
that is something Dan and Peter are particularly hot on that. And whenever somebody suggests, right, let's do this string quartet, and we look at what's on IMSLP, they will decide, right, this is the score, which is definitely public domain. These scores are iffy, or they're definitely not in this country, or whatever. And we will find, so when we're looking for an IMSLP score, that is the first thing we look at.
Hmm.
And the next thing, if there's more than one that is definitely public domain, we will then um, look for the cleanest score.
Yes.
And can I just say a little bit about optical music recognition,
Yeah.
OMR?
Actually,
Which,
before you do, I just want to mention. I want to finish this thought about the years. So the thing is, the music itself, because she died in 1883, her music, the composition itself, is all public domain. But that
yes,
doesn't mean any particular edition is. So
no,
if someone else went through that handwritten manuscript and typeset it and made their own nice printed edition of it, that edition is not necessarily public domain. And that's what I think Maureen is talking about. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So you would not be able to copy their editorial decisions
exactly.
because
So
that
as I
that
say,
edition is
we
still
have
copyrighted.
Yes, so as I say, there is a string quartet, a piano duet edition of it that has been published, but that is not in public domain. That is still in copyright.
Right.
So we made a point of not consulting that at all when we were doing the transcription or the editing.
Gotcha. All right. So what are you going to say about optical music recognition?
Yes, it would be wonderful if it worked really well. And we have done a few of our transcribers have dabbled with it and done a few transcriptions using it. But what we find is, unless you have got an absolutely pristine score and pretty much standard notation, forget it, because there is so much editing required. You might just as well start from scratch.
That's always been
Um,
my experience as well.
yes, and that is what has been found. If you're doing something like Haydn or Mozart, you're okay. But if you're going to go to Janacek, where he changes the time signature and the key signature on a regular basis and puts ever such a lot of articulation in, there's no way that OMR can cope with it. Whether it will improve, I don't know. But we have got people that do use it to a degree,
Hmm.
but we haven't found it as useful as I was first told it would be.
Yeah, that's definitely it's definitely an area of research that's, always improves, and there are, third-party commercial programs that do a better job than others. But what I find is even when they seem like they're doing a good job, there's still going to be a fair number of errors, and it requires the kinds of errors you're going to get are like too many beats in a measure because it misinterpreted a duration, and then if it's piano music and there's multiple voices, they could be
Yeah.
notes assigned to the wrong voice. The level of MuseScore expertise it takes to fix those mistakes is larger than the amount of MuseScore expertise it takes to enter the music in the first place. So
Absolutely.
even if there's not many errors, correcting the errors can be unbelievably time consuming if and require expertise.
Yes.
So yes, this
So
is amazingly just amazing work that's being done here to take music that essentially has been lost to humanity and bringing it back to life. This isn't just
that's what
about
I feel.
making it
And
transposable or
can I
whatever.
just put
Yeah.
out a plea? If there's anybody with a professional string quartet that's prepared to play this, I would
Ah.
love to see it on YouTube.
Hmm. That's a challenge there. So
And
yes.
if it's in the UK, I would travel the length and breadth of the UK to hear it
Ah,
played. I would
nice.
love to hear a live performance.
All right. Well, so this idea of figuring out how to get live performances of pieces, usually composers are interested in getting their own pieces, and then each composer's like, well, I want my piece, and I want my piece. But now this is like a piece of history, and it's going to have that
Yes.
much more likelihood of catching someone's eye on that. So yes, I will gladly be a bit of your megaphone on that and try to see if we can find someone.
I think I've done with sharing the screen now.
Okay.
I'll see if I can get back onto.
Yeah, somewhere there is your. Oh, there
Yeah,
you found it.
stop sharing. There you go. Right, I'm
Beautiful.
back.
All right. So yes, no, that's just fabulous, fabulous information. So yeah, this project, getting all this music available. Ooh, my thing just died. I'm gonna try to reload it and see if it because I have another computer here where I'm monitoring things, and that one just crashed. But it's back now, so all right, whatever happens sometimes. Um, so yes, we are approaching the end of where we were. Maybe how much we'd want to talk, but if there's any last thoughts that you want to get in, now's a good time to start doing that.
Right. Well, our greatest need is for more transcribers at the moment. Some of our older ones have dropped off the scene, and I'm always willing to train new ones. I don't care if your MuseScore skills are a bit limited. We'll do it a page at a time and gradually train. And anybody who
Nice.
wants to get involved, that would be great. We have up to the OpenScore string quartet project started less than a year ago, and we've now got about 25 complete quartets transcribed. But I would like
Wonderful.
that to increase, and it all depends on transcribers. We're all volunteers. I'm a volunteer. All the transcribers and the reviewers are volunteers, other than at the moment we still have this one doing a bit of editing for us. But this is a voluntary project. It's very time consuming, but once you get into it, it's addictive.
Yes, I imagine so. So, by the way, there is a question from, and I will just attempt to pronounce Malu, probably not right, but is asking kind of another version of the same question I asked earlier about process for entering things, whether it's one line at a time or one measure at a time. And the answer that kind of came up is everyone has their own way of doing it. There's no right
Yes.
or wrong to it. But you're asking specifically about trying to reduce for piano. I will say, when you're dealing with piano music specifically, um, I I like to get one staff of one measure as good as possible, all voices. And then whether I then move on to the bottom staff of that measure or to the next measure is going to depend on the piece. If there's cross staff notation, obviously I have to deal with both staves together. If there's not cross staff notation, I will often do an entire line of music top staff and then the entire line of music bottom staff. If it's something like a fugue where the voices are easily separatable, then I will do it one voice at a time. But I almost never do more than one measure. I never normally do more than one measure at a time unless it's something like a fugue where I really can just enter one voice for all the way through. But yeah, everyone is going to be different about this, and every piece is going to be different.
Right. Well, unless you have anything else, um, if people want to get in touch with me, you can either do it through this community or through OpenScore. Any comment that is placed on OpenScore string quartets will get to me, um, and I will be delighted to uh, take it further.
Well, that sounds great. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that in our music engraving workshop, we focus on using some string music as the things we work on so people get practice on some of the particular things. And then maybe Maureen and we can talk about like a particular string quartet that would be interested to get people to try to transcribe, because we have people transcribing things for the workshop just to work on their own skills. If they would be things that could help you, then so much the better. So maybe we'll
Well, if you give, how many people do you have in your workshop?
well, the thing is, there's, the number that are actually signed up, and then there's the number that are actually contributing on a regular basis. But, it's entirely possible there would be a dozen or so people working
So
on
a
any
dozen
given
or so
project.
people working on one page of a quartet. That you
That
very
gets it
quickly
done,
get a
right?
quartet done.
Yeah. So anyhow, we'll definitely be
But
looking
that
at that. Yeah.
just as a an incentive, anybody who does transcribe for us is entitled to 1 month's free MuseScore Pro
Yeah.
for each movement transcribed or reviewed. And this applied also during the Leader Corpus days.
Interesting.
And
Nice.
the interesting thing is, I checked my account the other day, and I have free MuseScore Pro until I'm about 98.
Nice. Beautiful. Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for all the work that you've done on this and for being here and chatting with me about it today. So it's just an amazing project, and so glad it's happening, and so glad that you're doing all you're doing to make it happen.
Well, thank you very much for letting me talk about one of my favourite topics.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again, and I'm going to get ready to close out here. So give me one moment here. So
Do you want
thanks
me
again,
to
Maureen.
leave?
Yes, well, yeah, you can't leave. I can kick you out. Is
All right,
apparently the way it
okay.
works. So thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. So, yes, that was Maureen Redmond, who is a manager for the OpenScore project, talking about the project and how all the wonderful things that come from it. So, I'm going to finish out just playing our music as usual. This has been Marc Sabatella with my special guest, Maureen Redmond, with the MuseScore Café. And I hope you've enjoyed this kind of special session talking about the OpenScore project and this process of putting our skills to use, putting MuseScore to use for the betterment of the world, really. I mean, that's the fact that it's rediscovering some older music that's not published and making it available. I mean, that's like one of the most important things that music could be doing right now. So I would love it to see some people get involved, and we'll be looking at that in the context of the workshop. If you're not already a gold level member to be and participating in the workshop, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. But the end of that commercial. I'll be back next week for the first Wednesday of the month. So we'll be doing an Ask Me Anything session. So we'll just be talking about whatever, answering questions. And tomorrow will be the music masterclass as usual, and we'll be looking at some of the voice leading exercises, some of the sight singing things that we're doing as part of the musicianship skills workshop. So thanks again, everyone, and I will see you next time.